Professor Prabhat, Vice Chairman State Planning Board, Kerala. Professor P.J. Kudian MP, Mohammed Amin, Shri T. Balakrishnan, Shri John Mathai, distinguished guests, dear friends. I am extremely thankful to all of you for being present in this conference. I am happy to note that the gathering is a cross-section of the opinion makers of the nation. The Industries Department of Government of Kerala, for the last so many months, was considering to conduct a national conference, mainly for highlighting the achievements and the performance of the state-level public sector undertakings in Kerala, and also to project the certain issues regarding the governance of state-owned enterprises. Of late, owing to the global financial crisis, there is thinking in favor of state-owned enterprises in contrast to the ideological position during the 90s, when the public sector institutions were looked upon with contempt as liabilities of state exchequer and made stumbling block for the general development. It was the period of unfettered privatization, unbundling of PSUs, and downsizing of governments. This experiment of unrestricted privatization and free flow of capital proved to be catastrophic not only to the underdeveloped or undeveloped nations, but also to the most advanced industrialist countries. India has a great history of developing not only heavy industries in the public sector, but also medium and traditional industries. The first Prime Minister of India, Shri Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, a worshipper of state-owned enterprises, had praised such units as temples of development. Almost all heavy industries and strategic industries in India were commissioned in the public sector. It is not only that the private industries in the country was grown and developed with the help of mega public sector units, but it is depressing to note that there is a policy shift nowadays. It is important to note that this is happening when great debates are going on worldwide, focusing on the ownership structure of the productive sector, mainly due to the devastating financial meltdown from which the global economy is yet to be salvaged. Compared to all other states, Kerala has the highest number of state-level public enterprises. There are 114 public sector units in the state, among which 28 units have been laying close since several years. Under the Industries Department alone, there are 46 functioning PSUs, out of which there are citations to state that many of them were not managed professionally, and some of them were making huge losses, abysmally poor with making huge losses. I am happy to inform this August gathering that with the concerted efforts, with continuous monitoring and timely intervention, the situation has been positive since 2006-07, and the profit of the sector as a whole in 2008-09 was rupees 169 interventions, and by rationalizing the governance. I am thankful to the Finance Minister of the state for providing uninhibited support for the revival of the units with liberal budgetary support. I am not going to the details of the steps initiated by the government to improve the performance, which will be elaborated by the Principal Secretary in his presentation. I understand that there are certain serious issues that are being faced by SLPs of all of the states. Obsolete technology, organizational weaknesses, financial constraints, poor marketing network, tough competition from the private sector, and massive imports are some to point out. In spite of protective treatments from concerned governments, these enterprises are unable to surmount these disadvantages. For developing a strong network of SLPs, which is the demand of the times, I earnestly believe that there must be a political decision, synthesis of knowledge and action, governmental support, and pro-PSU media support. It is high time to have a national debate on these issues, and hope this conference, which is an assembly of pioneers in these areas, will provide an avenue to start such a debate. Before concluding, I would like to mention about those who have made significant contributions for the development of the state PSUs. I am extremely thankful to the Honorable Minister for Defence, Sri A.K. Antony, for his helps in starting the joint ventures between state and central PSUs. He had also helped the state by starting the units of many central PSUs in Kerala. Sri T.K. Nair, Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, and Sri K. Chatterjee and Cabinet Secretary were among those helpful for revamping the state PSUs. Officers of state cadre who are now working in the central governments were always cooperative to satisfy the state needs. I express my sincere thanks to all these officers. I take this opportunity to welcome you all and look forward for a meaningful dialogue by the esteemed participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir, for that wonderful presidential address. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to have Professor Prabhat Patnaik, Vice Chairman, State Planning Board, Kerala, to be inaugurating this national conference. Professor Prabhat Patnaik has achieved international acclaim with his incisive analysis of economics and politics. He joined the Faculty of Economics and Politics of the University of Cambridge, UK in 1969. He became a professor at Centre for Economic Studies and Planning at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has been Vice Chairman of the Kerala State Planning Board since June 2006. Sri Patnaik has been recently included in a 4-member high-power task force of the United Nations to recommend reforms of the global financial system. With that words, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Professor Prabhat Patnaik for his inaugural address.
President, Honorable Sri Karim, Professor Kurian, Sri Mohammad Amin, Sri John Mathai, Sri T. Balakrishnan, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege that I have been asked to inaugurate this very important conference, which is devoted to the entire issue of state-owned enterprises. Honorable Sri Karim said that there should be a debate on the role of the state-owned enterprises. I would like to take this opportunity given to me of inaugurating this conference to use my inaugural address to start such a debate. I believe that public sector enterprises, or the existence of a public sector, is essential for the building of a humane society, and therefore it is a necessary component of a democratic polity. Behind this conclusion lie 3 presumptions. First, that the outcome in a free market private enterprise economy is something which is not necessarily socially desirable. In fact, that outcome differs from the outcome that is socially desirable. Second, that social interest is best served by the state, because the people have the potential for changing the nature of the state, for holding the state accountable through political intervention, whose scope may range from a social revolution to, in fact, voting out a government that they don't like. As a result, the state is a unique entity which actually can, therefore, be legitimately held responsible for defending social interest. And third, that social interest is defended by the state, not necessarily always ideally through fiscal means, taxes and subsidies or monetary or other policies, that in many instances it becomes necessary for the state to defend social interest by directly carrying out a certain number of economic operations. These instances, in my view, relate to at least 5 different cases. The first case is where certain essential amounts of commodities, like food, healthcare, education is something which is not provided access to the entire population as a result of the operation of a free market private enterprise economy. Now, in such a case, it becomes necessary for the state to step in to ensure access to these essential amounts of essential commodities for everybody. Now, of course, it is possible that the state can do so by income transfer, the state can do so by using fiscal means, but then this has the invidious result quite often of the private enterprises that provide these commodities jacking up their prices and in effect using the state budget to enrich themselves. Price control therefore becomes essential, and of course a very effective substitute for price control is for the state itself to step in to produce or direct the supply of or distribute many of these commodities. So the role of the public sector as a guarantor of ensuring an essential minimum is of course the first such instance of the necessity of a public sector in a democratic polity. The second arises when you have high levels, I mean, you know, when it's not a question of just essential amounts of commodities, but quite often access to certain commodities, other commodities, is restricted by monopoly pricing, for instance. Here again, price control may become essential, and of course, a very effective way of enforcing price control is to have the countervailing power of state production as a means of, as a bulwark against breaking private monopolies. Now this has a very important implication in today's context. We know that many of the state governments are vying with one another in order to attract private investment for purposes of industrialization. Of course, they are placed in a dilemma where if you do not attract private investment, then of course you do not industrialize. On the other hand, if you do attract private investment, then of course that strengthens monopolies. One way out of this dilemma is of course the use of the public sector. The role of the public sector as a countervailing power against private monopolies, whether domestic or foreign, is an extremely important role. The third case is of course where you have natural monopolies, significant economies of scale, or significant externalities. In all such cases where, for instance, you have to have a minimum scale of production, which, I mean, either natural monopolies confer a monopoly on private producers, which is socially undesirable, and in all such cases, therefore, a public sector owned by a state that is accountable to the people is a far better option in a democratic polity. Likewise, in situations where significant economies of scale, in situations where the externalities, external benefits, for instance, like technological development, research, and so on, basic research, which private enterprises will never be able either to do at all or to do it at a sufficient scale, it becomes necessary for the state to step in. A similar case, the fourth case, if you like, arises when, for instance, there are significant uncertainties. The absence of an entrepreneurial class is in fact one example of such subjective uncertainties being in the minds of potential private producers. The absence of an entrepreneurial culture, which for instance Nobel laureate W. Arthur Lewis used as an example where state production becomes necessary. The state has to become